Tool proficiencies let your character craft and create items that can be really useful. They're usually something you'll use during downtime, which makes them a crucial part of your character's identity as well, and they can actually be great tools for combat at lower levels. If you want to make the most out of your character, it's pretty important to understand how tool proficiencies work and what you can do with them. Starting off this list at number 10, we have Brewer's Supplies. Brewer's Supplies are a pretty straightforward tool, but also a pretty fun one, giving you all the necessary ingredients to make any fermented drink you want. Of course, the drink you're probably going to be using them for the most is ale, which is also the reason why Brewer's Supplies makes it a number 10 spot on this list. Most adventuring parties won't say no to a night of drinking, so if you want to make yourself the most valued member of your group, picking up a set of Brewer's Supplies is a pretty surefire way of doing that. Beyond that, though, Brewer's Supplies have some extra applications which can make them even more useful. NPCs are just as susceptible to ale as your party, and Brewer's Supplies let you add your proficiency bonus to any check you make when you're trying to supply someone with alcohol. This is especially useful when you're trying to get information out of NPC, or setting them up for your party's rogue to pickpocket their pockets. On a DC of 10, Brewer's Supplies also lets you detect any form of poison in a drink, which lets you save your party from poisoning. If you manage to hit a DC of 20 on a check, you can even completely ignore the effects of alcohol on yourself, which can lead to some fun role-playing moments. Another potential use is if you're going to be playing a survival-based campaign, because proficiency in Brewer's Supplies lets you purify up to 6 gallons of water on a long rest, and 1 gallon on a short rest, something that you would normally use a level 1 spell Purify Food and Drink for. This means that technically Brewer's Supplies are just a free first level spell, though not an especially good one. Brewer's Supplies can be pretty useful, but most of their uses are limited to social settings and aren't really good in other situations, which makes the tool proficiency a bit situational. They're still a pretty fun role-playing tool though, which is why they still make it to the number 10 spot on this list. And at number 9, we have Leatherworker's Tools, which gives your character all they need to prepare leather hides for making armor, weapons, or clothes. The basic use of Leatherworker's Tools is already pretty good, because making simple leather armor and grips for weapons actually comes in handy, especially in campaigns where merchants aren't very common. However, what bumps it above Brewer's Supplies is the fact that, depending on how forgiving your DM is, you can use hides and other materials from magical creatures to craft extremely useful magical items, including, for example, Displacement Robe from the Hide of Displacer Beast, which is a pretty powerful magic item to be able to craft early on. Because of this, the basic use for leatherworking tools is pretty much only limited by how creative you can be with your crafting and what kinds of creatures your party is able to take down. Unfortunately, Leatherworker's tools do have a problem that a lot of tools shares, which is that their other applications are kind of limited, similar to Brewer's Supplies. For example, the PHB says the Leatherworking's tools can add your proficiency bonus to any history or investigation check you make that involves leather. Now, that might be useful in very specific situations, but even then, you're going to be just as much use as any other character that has proficiency in history or investigation, as proficiency with leatherworking tools just lets you add your proficiency bonus to the skill check. Outside of crafting some specific magical items, which is still a pretty powerful ability, leatherworking tools don't have many other uses, which is why they only make it at number 9 on this list. And at number 8 spot, we have Carpenter's Tools, a tool which mainly lets your character build or fix wooden objects specifically. Similar to Leatherworker's Tools, Carpenter Tools lets you add your proficiency bonus to a bunch of checks to do with wood, such as knowing the use or the origin of wooden buildings, investigating irregularities, and even finding a trapdoor or secret passage. However, in comparison to Leatherworker's Tools, the limited uses is actually pretty good here, because you're likely to be looking for traps and secret doors in wooden areas anyway. One other action you can take with Carpenter's Tools is to add your proficiency to a stealth check when you're walking across wooden floors. If you know your campaign is going to be set in a town, or better yet, a city, then a proficiency in Carpenter's Tools is definitely a good option to take if you want to be sneaking around, but don't want to play a rogue. There's also another set of tools similar to Carpenter's Tools called Mason's Tools, which have very similar available actions, except Mason's Tools are for rock instead of wood. The thing that makes Carpenter Tools much more useful than Mason's Tools is the fact that they let you specifically repair wooden objects as well. If your party's cart breaks down or a hole gets punctured in your boat, then having proficiency in Carpenter's Tools just immediately fixes that problem. Even in campaigns where your party might not be traveling that much, you can still be useful to NPCs who will definitely need to fix a cart, door, or chest at some point. Mason's Tools only let you repair stone objects, which are going to be a lot less common when you're adventuring. Of course, there's also a cantrip called Mending that can substitute for some of the things Carpenter's Tools can do, but Mending is limited to repairing only 1 foot of damage, which often isn't enough to fix more severe problems. Overall, Carpenter's Tools are a pretty all-around useful tool, with their only downside being that, while fixing up carts and sneaking around is good, the impact on those abilities on the game just isn't as strong as the tools that are higher on this list. And at number 7, we have Cartographer's Tools and Navigation Tools. Both of these tools share this spot because they function pretty much the same way, and it just depends on the type of game you're playing whether you want to pick one over the other. The main thing that both of these tools are used for is to either determine which direction your party needs to travel, or for drawing up a map of an area you've already explored. Navigator's tools let you do this at sea, while Cartographer's tools let you do it on land. Of course, most campaigns are land-based, so Cartographer's tools are a bit more commonly used than Navigator's tools. However, Navigator's tools are more effective to make up for that, so both proficiencies are about as useful. For example, determining the direction and distance of a destination with Cartographer's tools requires a DC of 15, and with Navigator's tools it only requires a DC of 10. Both of these tools are especially great because they're always basically useful. Even if you might not immediately need them, you never know when your party is likely to get lost or dropped into an unfamiliar territory during a campaign, and it can be pretty crucial to have someone who's able to identify landmarks or map out surroundings on the fly. If you're thinking of using either of these tools, make sure to check with your DM before playing to see if it's going to be a more nautical or land-based adventure and make your decision based on that. All in all, Cartographer's and Navigator's tools don't let you do anything insane, but they're really solid options with very few downsides and are pretty much always going to be useful, which makes them a good fit for number 7 on this list. And at number 6, we have the Forgery Kit, which is a tool that basically lets your character interact with and make forged documents really easily. The rules for the Forgery Kit give some pretty good examples for what kind of documents you can forge with it, and show exactly what's great about the Forgery Kit. You get a lot of freedom to be creative with the tool, and it can be very effective in a lot of different situations. For example, you can forge papers that proclaim you to be a noble in order to sneak your way into someone's manor or an aristocratic party. A lot of cities and D&D adventures also require specific documents if you want your party to be allowed in, and a Forgery Kit makes it pretty easy to produce those. You could even forge completely fake historical documents to convince the members of a cult to abandon their god, or cause a kingdom to come toppling down because you provided irrefutable evidence that their king is a bastard. What's more, outside of using a Forgery Kit, there isn't really a reliable way to forge a document in D&D that doesn't end up costing you a spell slot, so it's pretty valuable and unique proficiency to have. Proficiency with the Forgery Kit also lets you make any forged document you want on a short rest, as long as it's one page, which is pretty crazy as most tools only let you use their abilities during a long rest. So while it may be kind of limited to more social campaigns, the amount of impact this one tool proficiency brings to the table, along with how unique it is, makes it definitely deserving of a spot on this list. And at number 5, we have the Herbalism Kit, a tool which allows your character to work with plants to make potions and identify illnesses. Now, the great thing about the Herbalism Kit is that it lets you make potions of healing, something which is incredibly useful if you can find the right plants. Giving your entire party access to potions of healing essentially gives your party the ability to heal themselves at will for only an action on their turn, which at low levels is really good. What makes the Herbalism Kit even better is that it also lets you add your proficiency bonus to any checks you want to make to find plants for healing potions. So not only does it let you make potions of healing, it also makes finding the ingredients for them much easier. And if you find yourself stuck with some extra healing potions, you can always just start selling them, as healing potions are usually pretty expensive. Also, in some survival-based campaigns, the Herbalism Kit would be a good tool to consider as well, similar to Brewer supplies, as it helps you in finding good plants to use as a source of food. Those two tools are also great in combination. If you have a character with proficiency in both, you'll pretty much never run out of food or water. Now, if this proficiency just gave your character the ability to make healing potions and find food, it would already be pretty good. But it also helps you identify what kind of illness someone is suffering from on a DC of 20, and also makes it easier to identify unknown potions. Potions are a pretty big part of D&D, so letting you make potions and help your party identify them is pretty amazing, and definitely makes the Herbalism Kit worthy of taking up the number 5 spot on this list. Unfortunately, the usefulness of healing potions does start falling off pretty fast at higher levels though, which is why it's not at a higher spot than the next 4. And at number 4 on this list, we have Alchemist supplies, a proficiency that lets you create all kinds of useful substances for in and out of combat. Now, the Alchemist supplies gives your character access to a large amount of optional things to craft, which is an especially good thing to be able to do during your downtime, as it means you'll never run out of things to do. It even lets you identify potions and poisons, so it's basically doing half the work of the Herbalism Kit already. Out of combat, the most useful thing about Alchemist supplies is that they let you start a fire. Even though there's a couple of cantrips that do something similar, like Firebolt and Create Bonfire, all of those spells are pretty flashy and require verbal components, which means you can't really do them stealthily. If you want to burn something down quick without having to pass a check or draw attention to yourself, Alchemist supplies can come in really handy. However, by far the best thing about Alchemist supplies are the substances you can craft, because they can just let you add extra damage to your party's attacks, which at lower levels is insanely good. Most DMs will allow you to attach something like Alchemist Fire to an arrow, which already adds an extra 1d4 fire to the attack. However, if you also attach a vial of acid to the arrow, then you could be doing another 2d6 acid damage. Fire might be a more useful damage type, but 2d6 acid damage available at first level is really good, especially considering you're often going to be adding that onto your character's damage totals. Although, also be sure to ask your DM if you can even do this, because this is kind of homebrewy. Of course, Alchemist Supplies shares the same problem as the Herbalism Kit in that their usefulness drops off pretty quick, which means they don't quite make it to the top 3 of this list. However, Alchemist Supplies also allows you to create antitoxins, which gives some advantage on saving throws against poisons. Even at higher levels, it's nice to not have to use a spell slot to save someone from poison, which is why Alchemist supplies are still slightly higher than the Herbalism Kit on this list, as they do have some other uses at high levels. Coming in at number 3, we have the Poisoner's Kit, which lets your character interact with poisons in some pretty unique ways. Obviously, the main reason that the Poisoner's Kit is so high on this list is pretty self-explanatory. Being able to make poisons whenever you want is really good, at lower levels and even at higher levels. At lower levels, it just allows characters in your party to add extra poison damage to their attacks, which can make a huge difference in low-level combat, similar to Alchemist supplies. At higher levels, you'll be able to use poisons that can completely disable your enemies, inflicting the paralyzed condition on them, which stops them from moving, gives advantage on attacks against them, and every attack that hits becomes an automatic crit in melee. If it could just help you create different poisons, the Poisoner's Kit would obviously be really good, but it has some pretty nice extra uses as well. For example, it lets you add your proficiency bonus when trying to cure someone who's poisoned. Plus, the Poisoner's Kit has some really good synergy with a lot of other tools as well. If another member of your party has proficiency in Brewer supplies, it makes it that much easier for you to accidentally slip some poison into an NPC's drink. Or if any character in your party is proficient in the Herbalism Kit, they can easily provide you with the necessary ingredients for your poisons so you can never run out of stock. Unlike a lot of the previous tools, the Poisoner's Kit is basically just as useful in both combat and social scenarios, which kind of means no matter what sort of campaign you're in, you'll always find some good uses for it and you'll always have some significant impact, which definitely makes it deserving a high spot on this list. And at number 2, we have the Disguise Kit, which mainly allows your character to assume all sorts of disguises. The reason the Disguise Kit is so high on this list is because disguising yourself in D&D is just insanely useful. It might seem like it's only good in campaigns which are more social focused, but there's so many ways to use a Disguise Kit in combat or exploration focused games as well. Think about infiltrating a goblin dungeon by disguising the orc in your party as a broad hobgoblin, or disguising your entire party as prisoners. You could even use a Disguise Kit to scare off entire groups of enemies by disguising yourself as a vampire, one of the strongest creatures in D&D. There's a good reason why the spell Disguise Self is a 2nd level spell, which basically does the same thing. And even though Disguise Self is a quicker way to do what Disguise Kit does, it still costs you a 2nd level spell slot. The Herbalism Kit and Brewer supplies were already crazy good because they mimic effects of some okay 1st level spells and cantrips. Mimicking Disguise Self, which is a really useful 2nd level spell, is just really good and a pretty insane ability to have access to from level 1, no matter what kind of campaign you're playing, which makes the Disguise Kit a great fit for the number 2 spot on this list. And at number 1, we have Thieves Tools, which are probably the most well-known tool in all of D&D, and for very good reasons. Whatever kind of campaign you're playing, social, exploration, or combat focus, your party's probably going to have to deal with either locked objects or traps, and probably both of those things. Thieves Tools gives your character a way to deal with all those. You can pick locks of doors or chests, and disarm traps as well. Similar to the Disguise Kit, which is a slightly worse version of Disguise Self, just one of the abilities on Thieves Tools mimics the 2nd level Knock spell, a spell which instantly unlocks any lock. Except Thieves Tools is actually a better version of the Knock spell in a lot of situations, as the Knock spell makes noise when you unlock something, and Thieves Tools are completely silent. Of course, Thieves Tools do need you to make an ability check, but a rogue that uses them will most likely have expertise, which means they add double their proficiency bonus, and so any check with the tools will probably succeed anyway. So a 2nd level spell in addition to disarming traps is already really good. But Thieves Tools also let your character place traps, not just disarm them. For comparison, a spell that lets you create magical traps, Glyph of Warding, is 3rd level. Of course, the traps you make with Thieves Tools are probably less strong than Glyph of Warding, but still, that means that Thieves Tools has the effect of a 2nd level spell, a less powerful 3rd level spell, and the ability to disarm traps all in one, which gives you a pretty good idea of exactly how broken this tool proficiency is in D&D, and why it definitely deserves to take number 1 spot on this list. Alright, and that's the video. If you know of any other ideas similar to this one that you'd like to see made, please let us know down in the comments below.